Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking a bit of a paradox.
Mm.
We're looking at a structure that is, widely considered the oldest covered wooden bridge in Europe. It's a global icon of Swiss heritage. You've definitely seen it on a chocolate box or a travel blog.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm talking about the Kapellbruck, the Chapel Bridge in Lucerne.
It is the defining image of that city. I mean, you have the Reuss River, this amazing zigzagging wooden walkway, the flowers, the stone tower. It just looks like it's stood there completely unchanged since the Middle Ages.
But see, that's the paradox, right? Because as I was going through the archives and the architectural analysis for this, it became pretty clear that the oldest bridge is actually, well, it's brand new.
Or at least a huge part of it is, yeah.
But right, it's significantly newer than most tourists realize. We aren't just looking at a bridge, we're looking at a case study in trauma, reconstruction, and what I found most fascinating, propaganda.
That is a great way to frame it. Because if you look at the source material, this isn't just a crossing from point A to point B. It's a defensive fortification, it's a political billboard, a torture chamber, and, a survivor of a catastrophe that happened in our lifetime.
Let's start right there with that catastrophe, because usually when we talk history on this show, we're talking about centuries ago.
Hmm.
But the defining moment for this bridge, the event that literally reshaped what we see today, happened on August 18th, 1993.
The night the landmark burned. And you really can't overstate how traumatic this was for Switzerland.
I was reading the timeline of that night, and the speed of the destruction is what just stands out. It's what, just after midnight?
Yeah.
The city is asleep. There's a small boat moored under the bridge. The police investigation, which we have summaries of, suggests the cause was incredibly mundane.
So mundane. A carelessly discarded cigarette.
Just flicked from the bridge or a nearby embankment, and it lands in the boat.
Right. Now, normally, a fire starting on a boat under a bridge. Okay, it might scorch some timber, maybe cause a local structural failure. But this didn't behave like a normal fire at all. The reports describe it spreading explosively.
And this is where the forensics get really interesting. I was trying to wrap my head around this because old oak is dense. It's hard to light. You can't just hold a match to an oak beam and expect it to go up.
No, but the bridge acted like a chimney.
The chimney, okay.
Exactly. You have two factors here. First, the architecture. The bridge is essentially a long covered wind tunnel. So once the heat got into the roof gables, the airflow just pulled the fire horizontally along the structure.
But the second factor, the accelerant, that's the one that really surprises people. It wasn't gasoline or chemicals or anything like that.
No.
It was spider webs.
Years and years of accumulated spider webs tucked into the eaves and the shingles.
It sounds almost trivial, doesn't it? But then you read the fire analysis and it makes total sense. These webs formed this dense mesh. They collected dust, they dried out, and essentially they created a fuse that ran the entire length of the bridge.
They trapped heat and flammable gases. So when the temperature hit a critical point, you didn't just get a slow spread, you got a flashover. The webs just ignited spontaneously way ahead of the main flame front.
Which explains the timeline. Within 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 2/3 of the bridge was an inferno. We are talking about 205 meters of history going up in smoke before the fire department could even really get set up.
And the emotional impact was immediate. You have to remember, Lucerne isn't a huge metropolis. The bridge is the heart of the city. There's a description in the sources of Krut H. Illy, who was the director of tourism at the time.
Right.
This was a man whose whole job was to sell Lucerne to the world, and he's just standing on the riverbank watching the beams collapse, weeping.
They compared it to a death in the family. It wasn't just losing infrastructure, it was an identity crisis for the whole city.
But this is where the story pivots from tragedy to what I think is a uniquely Swiss kind of miracle, because the smoke hadn't even cleared before they decided to rebuild.
Rebuild is almost too soft a word.
Yeah.
They decided to clone it. And they did it in record time. The fire was in August 93. They reopened the bridge in April 94.
8 months.
8 months. That speed is just insane for a heritage project. Usually you'd have years of committees, debates, sourcing materials. How did they pull that off?
Well, they had a winning lottery ticket they didn't even know they were holding. Just 2 years before the fire, the city had commissioned a complete photogrammetric survey of the bridge.
I saw that term, photogrammetry. That's basically, they had mapped every single millimeter of the bridge in 3D, right?
Precisely. They had inventoried every beam, every joint, every single peg. They knew the exact dimensions of every piece of wood. So when it burned, they didn't have to guess what the 14th century carpenters did. They had the blueprints.
Wow.
They essentially 3D printed it, but with artisanal carpentry.
So the bridge we walk on today is a total Ship of Theseus situation. It looks identical, it feels identical, but the material is largely 1994, not from the 1300s.
Correct. It's a faithful resurrection. But there is one part of the complex that didn't burn, the part that actually is original.
The water tower, the Wasserturm.
The big octagonal stone tower standing there in the river.
And I think this is a common misconception. I certainly thought this before digging into the notes, that the bridge and the tower were built as a set. But the tower is the older sibling.
Much older. The tower dates back to around 1300. The bridge came about 65 years later. And while the bridge is open and airy, the tower is, well, it's a vault. It's 34 meters of thick stone.
And its history is significantly darker. The bridge is for walking, the tower was for other things. The description of the dungeon level is chilling.
It is medieval engineering designed purely for misery. The ground floor, or really the basement level just above the waterline, has no doors, no windows.
So the only way in was through a hole in the ceiling of the room above it.
Exactly. They would sit a prisoner on a toggle, just a wooden stick tied to a rope, and then lower them down into the darkness. Once you were down there, you were completely isolated. Damp, cold, pitch black.
And the room above that wasn't exactly a luxury suite either. That was the treasury, but the sources mention it was also used for interrogation.
Which, in the context of the 14th to 17th centuries, meant torture. Such a stark contrast, isn't it? You have this picturesque scene today, swans, tourists eating ice cream, and just a few meters away, inside those stone walls, people were being broken.
Speaking of the treasury, though, we have to talk about the heist.
Yes.
Because for a building designed to be impenetrable, it had a massive security flaw.
The great heist of the 18th century. This story really highlights the dangers of, bureaucracy and just getting complacent.
So the state treasury of Lucerne, all the gold and silver, was kept in this tower, supposedly the safest place in the canton. But between 1748 and 1758, money just starts disappearing. A lot of money. Over 50,000 gulden. And the crazy part is, it wasn't a smash and grab. It was an inside job that lasted a decade.
It was two state officials, right?
Yes. They found a way to access the room, probably through the ceiling again, and they just started siphoning off the gold. But they knew that if the sacks looked empty, someone would notice.
So they pulled the old switcheroo.
The Indiana Jones maneuver. They replaced the gold coins with sand and stones.
It's so audacious. They were banking on the fact that the famous Swiss efficiency meant nobody would actually open the bags to check, as long as the inventory count on paper matched the weight on the shelf.
And they were right. It went unnoticed for 10 years. It just shows that even in a fortress, the weak link is always human trust.
Today, the tower has much friendlier tenants. I love the detail about the Alpine Swiss.
It's a nice evolution, isn't it? From a dungeon to a sanctuary, these birds migrate all the way from Africa every year to roost in the roof truss.
That's incredible.
And the Lucerne Artillery Association uses the middle floor. So is Birds and Buffs now. Let's move back to the bridge itself. Because the thing that really distinguishes the chapel bridge, aside from the fire, is the artwork. The triangular paintings up in the gables.
This is a feature unique to Lucerne. You don't really see this kind of cycle of paintings in other European wooden bridges.
But I want to push back on the idea that this was just decoration. Reading about the funding and the subject matter, this feels like 17th century social media. It was sponsored content.
That is exactly what it was. It was painted politics. You have to look at the timing. These were created in the 17th century, right in the heat of the Counter-Reformation.
Right. Europe is tearing itself apart over religion.
Yeah.
Protestants versus Catholics.
And Lucerne was a Catholic stronghold. These paintings were a way to double down on that identity. They were designed to show the history of the Swiss Confederation, but specifically through a Catholic lens, highlighting the city's patron saints, Saint Leger and Saint Maurice.
So it's propaganda. Look how holy we are. Look how powerful our history is. And the sponsorship model is hilarious. A council member would pay for a panel, and in exchange, they got to just slap their coat of arms on it.
Yep. It was a status symbol. If you were a big shot in Lucerne, you had to have your family crest on the bridge. It's not so different from donors getting their names on a university building today.
But the content of the paintings, I mean, some of it is just bizarre. We have to talk about the Giant of Radon. That's panel 001, isn't it?
It is, and it tells you so much about the worldview of the time. In 1577, some farmers found these massive bones near the village of Radon.
And because this is the 1500s, they don't say, oh, dinosaur, or mammoth.
No. A physician from Basel examines them and concludes, these are the bones of a giant human, a 6-meter-tall man.
They just paint a giant on the bridge.
They do. They enshrine this scientific finding as part of their local history. Of course, modern analysis tells us they were mammoth bones. But on the bridge, myth and history are presented as the exact same thing.
There's also the violence. The religious art was not exactly G-rated. The depiction of St. Ledger is visceral.
It's graphic. St. Ledger is the patron saint, and his attribute, the symbol that identifies him, is a hand drill.
Because his eyes were bored out with one.
Yes. And the painting does not shy away from that at all. It shows the martyrdom in detail. It was meant to inspire awe and respect for the suffering of the saints, but to a modern eye, it's pretty gruesome.
Now, here is the tragedy within the tragedy. When the bridge burned in 1993, we didn't just lose wood, we lost this art.
That was the biggest cultural loss. There were 111 panels hanging at the time of the fire. 86 of them were destroyed or severely damaged.
And this sparked a massive debate, which I found really interesting. Do you replicate the lost art? Do you hang blank panels? What do you do?
It's the classic restoration dilemma. If you paint a copy, is it just Disneyfication? If you leave it blank, is it too depressing?
So what was the compromise?
They used a mix. They restored what they could, they replaced some with copies, but they didn't try to hide the gaps entirely. And crucially, they added modern protection. The new setup includes fire-resistant glass between the paintings.
To break that chimney effect we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The glass stops the airflow. It prevents the spiderweb highway from ever forming again.
Now, we've focused on the Chapel Bridge, but the outline mentions this isn't the only bridge in the family. There's a younger sibling just down the river, the Spruer Bridge.
Spruerbrook. The name literally means chaff bridge.
Because that's where you were allowed to dump your garbage.
Specifically the chaff from the grain and leaves, yeah. It was downstream, so the waste would float away from the city.
The art on the Spruer Bridge is totally different, though. If the Chapel Bridge is about, look how great Luzern is, the Spruer Bridge is basically about, you're gonna die.
It is the dance macabre, the dance of death.
It's such a shift in tone. You're walking across, and every single panel features a skeleton.
But look at who the skeleton is dancing with. In one panel, it's a pope. In another, a king. Then a young girl. Then a peasant.
It's a great equalizer.
Exactly. The Chapel Bridge asserts hierarchy-rich sponsors, powerful saints. The Spruer Bridge dismantles it. It says, rich or poor, this ends the same way for everyone. It's a memento mori designed to keep the citizens humble.
It's fascinating that they put the death paintings on the garbage bridge. There's a symbolic link there about the disposal of the body and the soul.
There absolutely is. And it's worth noting there was a third bridge, the Hofbrück, which was actually the longest of them all.
It's just gone.
Demolished in the 19th century. They tore it down to build embankments and grand hotels. It's a reminder of how close the Chapel Bridge came to being destroyed, not by fire, but by progress. There were serious discussions about tearing it down, too.
It's wild to think that the city's most famous landmark was once seen as just an old wooden obstacle to traffic.
Heritage is a relatively new concept. Back then, they wanted a modern lakefront. We are just lucky they ran out of money or momentum before they got to the Chapel Bridge.
So, bringing this into the practical realm for our listeners, if they're going to Lucerne, how do they experience this properly?
Yeah.
The sources have some pretty specific advice on photography.
They do avoid high noon. The wood gets blown out and the shadows are way too harsh. Everyone seems to agree the blue hour is the time to go.
Just after sunset.
Right. You want that balance where the artificial lights of the bridge are on, reflecting in the water, but the sky still has that deep, rich blue. It creates that magical contrast.
And in terms of vantage points?
The Rahausquai, that's the riverbank by the town hall, that is the classic shot. It gives you the curve of the bridge with the water tower and the mountains like Pilatus in the background. But I would argue the real experience is on the bridge itself.
You have to walk it to see the paintings.
And to smell it. The sources mention the sensory experience, the smell of the old wood, the sound of the river rushing under your feet. And it goes without saying now, but strictly no smoking.
There are cameras and heat sensors everywhere now.
Oh yeah, it is monitored like a bank vault. They are not taking any chances with a second fire.
I want to wrap up with a thought that really stuck with me from the reading. We talked about how the bridge is a phoenix and how it's a reconstruction. But the history didn't stop in 1993.
No, it didn't. And this is where the restoration philosophy gets really profound.
The new paintings.
Right. They didn't just replicate the old world. Some of the new panels created after the restoration actually depict the fire itself.
So you're walking through a medieval gallery and suddenly you see a painting of the 1993 Inferno.
Yes. And paintings of the reconstruction workers. They integrated the tragedy right into the timeline.
That is such a powerful statement. Usually we try to hide the scars. We try to make it look like the bad thing never happened. But here, they're saying the fire is now as much a part of this bridge's identity as the medieval construction.
It validates the idea that history isn't static. It's not something that finished happening 500 years ago. The fire, the weeping director of tourism, the 8-month rebuild, that is all history now, just as significant as the Giant of Radon or the theft of the gold.
It connects the 14th century directly to the 20th century. It's a living document.
A living document written in wood, stone, and unfortunately, occasionally in ash.
Well, on that note, next time you see that postcard of Lucerne, I hope you see a little more than just geraniums.